Hey everyone, it's Sevy. It's easy to be bedazzled by the shine of 5-star characters, but we know that the real ones who got our backs are the 4 stars. That's why in this video, I want to honor our ever-reliable 4-star characters by featuring team comps that utilize exclusively 4-star characters. Given the right investment and synergy, 4-star teams can be just as strong as teams with 5 stars. With this, I hope players will have a better idea how to develop their account's potential. A few quick disclaimers. First, these teams can serve as general templates. You can substitute characters I mentioned with whoever works best from your account, whether 4-star or 5-star. These comps are not the be-all and all of 4-star comping, but suggestions to give you ideas of how to better explore your characters and potential teams. Then, for the sake of brevity, I won't go too in-depth about rotations, but I'll still guide you through the concepts and reactions at work in each team. And the teams I'm going to cover do not include the national team and its iterations, the core of which is Bennett, Xiangling, and Xingqiu. They are such a popular team, and with good reason. There are already a bunch of great videos covering that team, and I want to offer alternatives for players who feel that those units are constantly stuck together and wish to switch things up a bit. That being said, let me know in the comments as we go which 4-star team comp you love playing. Now, let's begin. The first team uses the Bennett-Xiangling combo, accompanied by Kaya and Rosaria to reverse melt. There are a few things at work here. First, Kaya and Rosaria will reverse melt onto Bennett's and Xiangling's pyro application. Second, Bennett's buff will be snapshotted by Xiangling's burst, Rosaria's burst, and Kaya's burst. And third, there's enough elemental particles to go around to battery one another. Bennett gives his to Xiangling, while Kaya and Rosaria can either self-battery or pass their particles to each other to keep the quick swap going. When it comes to builds, you have some alternative niche options here. Rather than the usual noblesse build, Bennett can hold an instructor set instead, which may even be cheaper to build. Then you can move the noblesse set elsewhere. Still, Rosaria or Kaya will perform just fine if you use typical cryo noblesse attack emblem artifacts. As for Xiangling, either the emblem or crimson full sets will do. Chongyun can also be used here instead of either Kaya or Rosaria. You just want to make sure that when he does his burst, it's after Bennett's skill or burst, since Bennett's strong pyro aura allows Chongyun's burst swords to reverse melt. He doesn't offer as much power as Kaya might, but that can be made up for with higher investment. Next is this Taser team of Sucrose, Beidou, Fischl, and Xingqiu, where Sucrose serves as the team's driver. With Sucrose's normal attacks, she can proc Beidou, Xingqiu, and more Oz if your Fischl is C6, while adding in swirls alongside the Electro Charge. With the Electro Resonance, you can also get a little more extra energy particles. Since Sucrose will be swirling a lot, it's crucial that she has a full EM 4-piece VV set, best if she's at level 90 because of how transformative reaction damage scales with character level. You also want Xingqiu to be able to get his ult ready on cooldown every time in order to keep up the Hydro application, so this team works best with him on a Sac Sword or Favonius Sword. Unfortunately, Lisa won't be an improved substitute for either Fischl or Beidou in this team because of her energy issues. This team is generally easy to execute. As a Taser team and with Beidou's Chain Lightning effect, this is best used against mobs of enemies instead of single bosses. The main inherent weakness this team has, though, is the absence of a healer. The only heals you'll get are from Xingqiu's rain swords. As such, players that don't feel confident playing without one may not be as comfortable with this team. However, if you can get past that, this is a very good team to invest in. It can definitely carry you from early to late game and in later Abyss floors. Next up, we have the 4-star Freeze team. The best iteration of this with 4-star units is Sucrose, Xingqiu, Rosaria, and Kaya, but thankfully this team has a lot of available substitutes. Sucrose can be substituted by Sayu or Animo Traveler, the only 5-star I'll mention here. Xingqiu can be substituted by Barbara, albeit yielding much lower DPS, and either Rosaria or Kaya can be substituted by Chongyun. On that note, Kaya and Chongyun actually make a great pair, since Chongyun's cryo field can infuse Kaya's normals with cryo, and you can make use of Kaya's relatively high normal attack multipliers for on-field DPS purposes. Anyway, taking the Sucrose, Xingqiu, Rosaria, Kaya iteration, it's pretty fun if Sucrose drives the comp, continuously swirling and spreading the Hydro and Cryo. It's, again, easy to execute. The only character whose energy you really need to worry about will be Xingqiu's, since Rosaria and Kaya can battery themselves fairly well. Bring out Xingqiu's swords and Kaya's and Rosaria's skills and bursts to freeze them immediately, then let Sucrose drive your team. For builds, one teammate could hold the Noblesse for a source of team-wide attack buff, and if you have a full Blizzard Strayer set, having one or both of your Cryo DPSs equip it to be able to stack crit damage would be a good damage boost. Then, aside from the usual sacrificial fragments on Sucrose, her alternative weapon could be the Thrilling Tales for even more attack buffing. As a freeze team, this comp can't be used against most bosses and definitely not against Cryo Slimes, but go ahead and use it against mobs, ruin enemies, those annoying Rift Hounds, and any freezable enemy in general. For the next team, we haven't forgotten Razor, who for a while remained as the dedicated physical DPS from the game's beginning. He is also one of, if not the most, prominent selfish DPSs, and as such is played as a Hypercarry, wherein his teammates serve to provide support or off-field damage while he takes up a lot of field time. Lately, his Hypercarry teams haven't been as effective against the recent Spiral Abyss cycles. I personally found using him against the current mobile enemies to be difficult to manage. And while he has AoE front damage, ensuring your enemies are positioned for simultaneous hits can be quite a challenge. But regardless, his teams are still very strong and surprisingly flexible. To start, he just needs access to Superconduct through Cryo, for which Kaya is already a free unit. Rosaria or Diona could fill that in too. One free slot can be filled in by sub DPSs. Fischl is excellent for single target damage and electro particles. Adding Xingqiu would turn this team into a pseudo electro charge and shatter team. Then the latest addition for Razor's Hypercarry team is Yunjin, whose normal attack buff synergizes well with Razor's playstyle. The other slot can be a dedicated healer or shielder to keep the team alive, like Barbara or Diona, who can also function as Razor's superconductor. Or if you're feeling adventurous, you can add another sub DPS too. You basically just want to cast everyone's off-field support before letting Razor go beast mode. For another reaction comp, there's Overload. It's a reaction that's often glossed over as being bad due to not having the big numbers as Vape or Melt reactions, or annoying since it knocks back enemies. However, in the right situation, Overload teams can be powerful. A great DPS for this comp is Yanfei, whose range can accommodate Overload's knockback a bit better than others. If you don't have Yanfei though, you can always just use the ever-dependable Xiangling. These Pyro DPSs will be comped with Bennett and with electro units, most notably Fischl and Beidou. In principle, you really just want Bennett's buff to be snapshotted by Beidou and Fischl and Xiangling if you're using her. The rest will be a matter of batterying your units to get as much uptime as possible, which isn't too difficult with this comp. Not only does Overload give strong AoE damage, but Yanfei, Xiangling, and Beidou's abilities are also great when facing multiple enemies. The only weakness this comp really has is that it can get challenging against small enemies that will get knocked back or flown around, so it's best if you're using it against ruin mobs or heavy enemies. Lastly, we have a Geo-centric comp. Even though Ito recently came out as a shiny new Geo DPS, let's not forget that 4 stars Ningguang and Noelle can each hold their own in terms of damage. They each come with a selection of Geo supports too. Geo Traveler is great for battery purposes and extra crit rate. Yunjin will buff Ningguang's or Noelle's normals, and Goro is also an amazing partner for Noelle. The 4th slot can go to any off-field DPS you have or just go full Geo. Either way, the nice thing about a mono Geo team is that the rest of your reaction-based units are essentially free for your other Spiral Abyss team. But if you just want to keep the double Geo, the other 2 team slots can go to pairs like Bennett and Xiangling, who can complement Ningguang's single target attacks, or Fischl and Xingqiu, who can complement Noelle's AoE attacks. Having elemental characters on hand can also make shield breaking a bit easier, since Geo characters alone can have difficulty with that. These Geo-driven comps are pretty fun to play, but also have limitations in terms of which enemies it can fight effectively for lack of offensive elemental reactions. It also doesn't have a lot of crowd control, so you want to balance your single target and AoE units. And those are my comp suggestions. I hope these templates can help you try some new teams or find some new potential use in your characters. But ultimately, don't forget to have fun and play the team that brings you the most joy. If this helped you out, don't forget to leave a like, consider subscribing to my channel if you haven't already for more Genshin Impact guides and content, and I'll see you soon. Take care!